Welcome, my friends, live from Tampa Bay, Florida. It's Elijah Campbell from the postgame show giving you coverage of the Final Four, where South Carolina took down Texas last night, 74-56, or 57, rather. My memory's not that bad. But we'll go ahead and give a thanks to our sponsors here right off the bat while we get this breakdown and preview what's to come, which is the pursuit of a fourth national championship for Dawn Staley and the Gamecocks. As always, my coverage here in Tampa, Florida, brought to you by our friends over at Columbia Craft and Peak Drift, Lexington Discount Homes, and Atkins Law. Thanks to them for allowing me to be here because I was in the house last night breaking down the game, sitting in the arena and talking to players and coaches afterwards. And it was quite the night, man. I think this game sums up exactly what the Gamecocks are at their peak, at their ceiling, right? I mean, I think going into this game, we talked a lot about what changes when you play a team for the fourth time in a season. And of course, it can be hard to beat a team three times. And of course, we all know Carolina beat them twice, once at home, once in Greenville for the SEC title. But here's the ultimate takeaway. Before I get into any other details, this Carolina team is just better than Texas. And that says a lot considering Texas was a 1 seed. They were tied with you in the SEC regular season standings. This was a really good Texas team. A flawed Texas team at times, but a really good Texas team. You beat them 3 times in the year because you are a better team, just simply a better team. And I think that game in Austin has kind of been proven with a larger sample size to be a fluke, right? And this team on any given day, on any given court, I think you can make those two teams play in Austin right now with a packed crowd for the Longhorns, and South Carolina still is the team that I'd expect to win. James Mack, thank you for commenting in. I can't speak today. Says, go Gamecocks, baby. Yeah, I bet it was a fantastic night for you, all Gamecock fans, to see this team reach its ceiling in a game. Because the concern was, and I had a little bit of it too, that after the Maryland and Duke games, the half-court offense, especially with the starting unit, seemed to struggle. It seemed at times to maybe be a little too hesitant with certain shots early in the clock. And when I look at this game and I look at what Carolina did better offensively against an elite Texas defense, this is a Texas defense that, mind you guys, was top 5 in the country in defensive efficiency. It is a great defense. Texas is a defensive-oriented team, and then whatever Madison Booker gives them, she gives them. But what South Carolina did last night, despite starting slow for the first 5 minutes, because the first 5 minutes were ugly, but after that, it felt like they were hunting shots quicker. They got into actions a little bit faster. The offense flowed a little bit more than it did in the previous couple games here in this tournament, and even the Indiana game as well. The Indiana game, it took an entire half to figure out the defensive game plan of what Indiana was doing and how they can counteract with it. And Texas does some similar stuff too, because Texas, between Taylor Jones and Kyla Oldacre, have 2 elite rim protectors. Texas's opponents shoot barely over 50% from the rim and 4 feet out. Those are gimmies, right, in college basketball or basketball at any level. Teams just don't finish around the basket well against Texas. So you kind of have to be able to generate your offense more inside out. You got to be able to hunt good shots, especially threes. And I think the 3-point numbers last night from South Carolina, even though maybe shooting a little more would be something that I would look at to maybe optimize the offense, you still at the end of the day went 7 for 11. Right. And the reason you're able to shoot such a high percentage is because they were rhythm threes. Right. And that's one thing that Tahina Powell has talked to me about when we do like these locker room availabilities. I asked her because as the point guard, one of the main facilitators of the offense, she really feels the offense and the flow of it maybe better than anybody can. And we know that Dawn Staley entrusts a lot in her to be able to diagnose issues on the fly and then to be able to adjust and fix it. And the one common theme, and I think it was after the Maryland game, when I was talking to Tahina about maybe what is missing in the half-court offense, maybe why aren't those outside shots falling? She says, we're not getting rhythm threes. And the rhythm threes, it's kind of like, because it's different for every player, but it's kind of like, Potter Stewart's definition of obscenity in a Supreme Court trial where, Supreme Court Justice Stewart says, I can't define obscenity, but I know it when I see it. Sometimes you can't define a rhythm jumper, but you know it when you see it. And last night they caught passes in rhythm. They got threes that were within the flow of the offense, especially quicker in the shot clock too. Sometimes shooting early in the shot clock doesn't make it a bad shot. I'm of the belief that sometimes the best looks you're going to get in a possession come in the first 5 to 10 seconds, maybe even 12, right? And last night you saw them a little more eager to get into some of those actions early and to be able to get those shots in the shot clock a little faster. Now, Chloe Kitts, when I talked to her about it, she said, with us, it might be different in terms of when you get your shot, but what she thought they did a lot better job of was finding the higher quality shots and maybe not passing them up. Even when it got late in the shot clock, she still liked the quality of shot that they were able to get. I'll go into our comment box right now. Adam Ritter comments in and says, my issue is we can't get slow start and how we're going to beat UConn. They just destroyed UCLA and got shooters. We have to start better. Amen, brother. I was talking with Glenn Matthews from Modern Exterminating. If you go on the Game TV, you'll see my about 7 or 8 minute conversation with him where we kind of gave our exterminator of the game. And of course, a lot of that's very defensive based, but we were talking off air about not being able, this very thing that Adam's bringing up is that you can't start slow against UConn because he got down 10-2 to Texas last night. If you get down 10-2 again against UConn, that lead can easily become 20-2 because what we saw with UCLA is elite, what some people would call spurtability. I know it's probably not a word. You probably can't find that in Webster's dictionary, but it has a really real meaning in the game of basketball, right? Some teams can go on runs and eviscerate you, make a close game a not so close game. And they rarely give up those runs. And usually the teams that control runs in a game, because you hear the cliche all the time that basketball is a game of runs, and there's a lot of truth to that. But when you look at the game of basketball, the teams that end up winning titles are the ones who can go on 8-0 or more runs and not give those up, because then you basically control the terms and conditions for the rest of the game. And when we talk about what this Carolina team needs to do against UConn, the transition defense is going to be the biggest part in this game, Adam. I think we watched this thing early. What UCLA failed to do against UConn was contain the outlet pass. Now, UConn is a really good outlet passing team, and they're one of the best teams in transition that I have seen in a long time, men's or women's. I mean, Florida's kind of like that on the men's side, where they can take the ball at the basket after a make or a miss and immediately get down the floor, and they outrun you down. And even when the fast break game gets really hectic, they just know what to do with it. Like there was a touch pass that Paige Beckers made last night where UCLA misses a shot, and it's either Sarah Strong or Azzy Fudd gets the rebound, and they make an incredible outlet pass. And Paige Beckers jumps to catch it, maybe about 7 or 8 feet above the right block. And as soon as that thing touches her hands, a little dump pass and gets a layup out of it because they run the floor so well. A lot of teams aren't able to get a fast break or even transition break where they are able to have everybody fill multiple lanes. And that's exactly what happened on that play. And a player like Paige Beckers is so good and so crafty and just has an elite feel for the game that touch pass can be made. And she knows she's making that touch pass before that pass gets to her, right? And that's what makes good. That's the difference between good players and great players, is that type of feel for the game of basketball. South Carolina is going to have to really get back on defense. They're going to have to bust tail to get back on defense, because UConn's going to want to do that exact same thing they did to them in Columbia back in middle of February, and apply that to this game tomorrow. If you go back, when I went back and watched that game, that loss to UConn, I was just astonished, completely astonished at how badly they got beat in transition. A Dawn Staley team doesn't usually lose in transition, right? Sometimes, Dawn's teams, they're elite defensively and they are very athletic and can get out on the break and they can win the race down the floor and they can make magic happen. Exactly the specialty of the game that Mylasia Fulwiley has is where she is just an absolute wizard in the open floor. And to see a team completely wear them out in transition was something that I never thought I would see from this program. And when you watch UConn do what they did to UCLA last night, it's easy to be like, wow, maybe that game in February wasn't a fluke. I don't want to say it's a fluke because UConn is that good. And there's not a team in women's college basketball that has played a more complete 2 months of basketball than UConn has. And that's the honest truth. They've played the best basketball since mid-February. And even though the Big East isn't very good, they beat the hell out of those teams, man. And they execute. It's the best team in women's college basketball right now. But I don't think they are 30 points worse than UConn if they play again. And they're going to play again tomorrow on a neutral floor. And it might not be so neutral because UConn has brought a ton of fans here. And that's just the big thing for me is that can you control the controllables in this type of game too? Can you get back on defense? Can you avoid UConn getting easy transition opportunities? You're going to have to, and that's going to be a big difference in this game is not making those same mistakes. I asked Sanaya Fagan actually today at the media availability that they had over at Amalie Arena before their open practice, which I think it might still be going on ESPN2 right now. But I asked, what did you guys learn about yourselves? And she said, not overlooking opponents. And she said playing down. I don't know if she meant, like playing down to your competition because you don't play down to UConn. You have to play up to UConn. I don't think she meant that in that way. But I think the gist of her response to me was kind of, we got to take every play seriously and execute every play. And that's the one thing that South Carolina did last night against Texas that I really appreciated was not just they executed on offense significantly better. You saw a lot of baseline actions, whether it be screens, whether it be duck-ins or reposts that got Joyce opportunities to score, that got Chloe some opportunities to score. Chloe didn't shoot a ton, but she was insanely efficient and got Sanaya chances around the basket. They ran more fluid offenses, and they executed a lot better too. And that helps a ton when it comes to maybe diagnosing what some of the issues were on offense back in Birmingham for the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games. But watching this team last night go after it on like what we call the 50-50 balls, right? Like rebounds that are in the air. So that's boxing out to get that rebound and avoiding the opponent getting an offensive board. Or watching what Tahina did on her second steal of the game when she kind of plays a passing lane perfectly. Another element of this defense that's better than anybody else in the country. Nobody plays gap help defense better than South Carolina, and you saw an example of it on that pow steal. But not just that she was able to get a hand on the ball. It's that she was able to get a hand on the ball, dive on the floor for it, and still knock it out of off of a Texas player and win a possession, steal a possession. Okay, a play like that steals a possession. Getting that 50-50 ball steals a possession from your opponent. And when Texas shot the ball so well from mid-range, which wasn't very sustainable throughout the course of the game, you're not going to hit contested 15, 16, 17-foot jumpers all night at the rate that Texas did. But when Texas was shooting that hot and you're trying to mount a comeback and you're getting yourself back into this game and you're trying to take over it, the best way to do that is by stealing possessions. And they stole a possession there because of how they were getting after it and diving for loose balls. And Tahina Paopao really had the play that I think maybe exemplified that type of effort the most last night. And you're going to need all of that and more against UConn. All of that and more. Because while UConn, maybe with their big three, and what I consider their big three between Paige Beckers, AZ Fudd, and Sarah Strong, there might not be a stronger big three in the sport. I doubt that there is. I highly doubt that there is, especially with how they're playing lately. But if you're going to beat a team like that, you've got to be able to win those 50-50 balls. You got to be able to get down on the floor and do a lot of the dirty work, right? Go back to Adam's comment here. It says, if we somehow lose and don't go our way, we still got to be proud of this team. It's hard to repeat as champs. I don't remember last time someone has repeated as champs, and I'm thinking about it right now. And you know what? I've got the internet at my disposal. If my memory doesn't end up serving me right, of who the last repeat champions were. Let's see. I feel like it had to be UConn because we've swapped. We haven't had consecutive winners in this sport in quite a long time. It'd be UConn in 15-16 to answer your question there, Adam. And that's a UConn thing. Very few teams have ever gone back-to-back. I know Southern Cal, when Cheryl Miller was there, did go back-to-back. Tennessee in the 90s had a back-to-back year. They also had a back-to-back year in the 2000s. And then when Breonna Stewart was there, yeah, James, you're right. Yeah, James says UConn won 4 straight. And you're getting right to my point. Yeah, when Breonna Stewart was at UConn, she went 4 for 4. that Breonna Stewart did not play a college basketball season where she did not win a national championship, which is still astounding. And that's a UConn thing too. And that also kind of leads me to this, like with what this matchup is tomorrow. It gives you a chance to not only beat UConn for a second title, because we know a few years back for Aaliyah Boston's championship that they beat UConn and beat UConn handily in that game to win a national title. But this will be the second time that you beat Gino and the evil empire in Stores to win a national title, which is amazing in itself. But it also puts you in a more rarefied air too, because I was talking with David Klonberg about this last night after the game. I didn't really realize this was the case until he kind of mentioned it, that only 2 teams in the history of women's college basketball, 2 programs, have won more than 3 titles. Now, Baylor's got 3 titles. South Carolina's got 3 titles right now. There are a handful of others that have 2 or 3, but no one has more than 3, except for Tennessee and Connecticut. Again, Tennessee, UConn, the the crown jewel blue bloods of the sport are the only ones that have won more than 3. So a win tomorrow means Dawn Staley, since taking over this program, would have put them in a conversation with UConn and Tennessee. How many of you that are watching this right now or have been Gamecock basketball fans your entire life would have ever imagined before Dawn took the program over that you would be discussed in the same level in class as Tennessee and Connecticut in women's college basketball? I don't. If you said you saw this coming, I don't want to call you a liar, but I'd accuse you of fibbing a little bit, because those are the 2 programs that are the ultimate example of winning in this sport. So tomorrow, more than just winning a national championship, because that's big in its own right? More than just winning a national championship, you put yourself in a program to be something that you never thought possible, and something that nobody else maybe had thought possible. Like, yeah, Kim Mulkey's won 4 titles, but 3 of them were at Baylor. 1 was at LSU. She put Baylor on the cusp of being in that discussion, but didn't stick around long enough to see that come to fruition. But what you can see tomorrow is that special opportunity to become the power in the sport. And then, of course, winning tomorrow makes it 3 in 4 years. That makes it 4 championships since 2017. So that's 4 in 8 years. That's dynasty. That's dynastic. And that's what I like. That's what gets me. It draws me to this program so much, is because in a seemingly short amount of time now, it took UConn and Tennessee a while to get to their points. And obviously the sport isn't as old as like men's college basketball, right? They got a little bit of a later start in Tennessee and UConn. Pat Summitt was really the trailblazer of winning a lot of these titles, and then Gino took it over mid-90s too, in 2000s. And then in the 10s, he dominated the entire decade. But the 2020s, it can be the utter dominant decade of the Gamecocks, and taking over an entire decade like that it just puts you in that rarefied air. And that's one of the things that's just on the line tomorrow. And that's what makes this game so exciting. The storylines behind it. Like there's so much legacy at stake. There's so much at stake with the history of the game of women's college basketball that's happening tomorrow. And that's what makes this incredibly, incredibly special. Adam asks too, says, besides Joyce and Pau, who needs to step up? I think Tessa and Fulwiley. I don't disagree. I mean, what the best thing Gamecock fans could see last night from Tessa were those 2 mid-range jumpers where she runs off these little curl screens. And yeah, they're mid-range pull-ups, but you need Tessa to be what she was in the national title game last year, when she scored 19. Right? That was really one of the big separators in that game against Iowa, was her hitting a couple threes, spacing Iowa's defense, and making them have to play from behind and win a shootout. And they didn't have the horses to do that. Honestly, Iowa last year in the national title game just didn't have the legs to continue with what South Carolina was doing for a whole 40 minutes of play. So for Tessa to be able to do that does so much for this defense for a few things, right? when we talked about what defenses were doing to South Carolina in the Indiana, Maryland, and Duke games, there was a lot of packing of the paint. There was a lot of doubling the post, right? And making Joyce prove that she can beat you if you decide to double her. That's what separates good bigs from great bigs, is the ability to, when you get double teamed, to find the open player, because it's just math, right? There's two people guarding the ball. That means one person is open. And if you can identify where that double comes from, you can find the open player. And that's kind of, to me, been Joyce's next big step, is being a playmaker as a big as well. And side note, she had 6 assists last night. I think she proved pretty damn well that she has that capability in her, and that she can make that next step into being a playmaking big. And that is absolutely fantastic for this team. But one thing that you can't do, going back to my point, is when you guard South Carolina and you want to pack the paint, that leaves you vulnerable to giving up open three-point looks. And so if Tessa is at her most confident and she's in a zone and she's feeling it with her jumper, which she does more often than not, I mean, she's a 40+ percentage, three-point shooter. She's an elite three-point shooter. All it takes is 1 or 2 threes from an open three-point shooter, and you can't play that defense anymore. You can't start doubling the post anymore, because then it becomes suicide. You're giving up open threes. And now you have to win a track meet. You have to not only win the track meet, you got to be able to match 3 for 3 as well. And as great as UConn shot last night, there's no guarantee they shoot like that again. If they did, it'd be all-time impressive, and it would be one of the better 2-game runs in a Final Four you've ever seen from a shooting perspective. So if Tessa, this is her importance in this game. Can she hit enough outside shots to make UConn have to space their floor defensively? That's why them hitting so many threes last night was so big, because Texas couldn't just pack the paint. And then when Joyce had the ball on the perimeter, Vic Schaefer, the coach of Texas, was so concerned about getting beat in those passing lanes and giving up a three that he had Kyla Oldacre, who isn't as good of a defender as she is, and as great of a rim protector as she's been for Texas this year. She's not one that you want guarding anybody out on the perimeter, because she just doesn't have that elite lateral quickness. But this was that play at the very end of the first half where Kyla Oldacre is applying ball pressure to Joyce Edwards about 25 feet away from the basket. And Joyce kind of in mid-dribble looks back at Dawn, and Dawn looks at her and does this. She's saying, go, take her to the rack. And because the threat of three-point shooting is there, when Joyce does go one-on-one with Oldacre, they don't collapse on her. There's not a weak side help defender that steps in and is wanting to make Joyce give the ball up, because you don't want to leave off corner three-point shooters. I think Tessa was in the game at the time. I think Powell was definitely in the game at that time. And you don't want to leave those two open, because all Joyce has to do is just boop, kick it out, and that's a wide open three. And then you give up a three at the horn. And that's the worst thing Texas could have done at the time, outside of having Joyce Edwards go one-on-one with Kyla Oldacre, and she was going to take that ball to the rack and score every single time in that matchup, every single time in it. An absolutely remarkable play right there, and I think a pretty bad coaching error on Vic Schaefer's part to not have Oldacre maybe sag off a little bit and provide at least a little bit of paint help and not give her that drive. So that's the value, right, that Tessa can bring. Tessa hits a couple threes. You expand your opponent's defense a little bit. That opens up driving lanes. That opens up lanes to be able to cut off of the ball, which South Carolina was doing a lot better job of in the half court after that first quarter last night. You saw them move off ball a little bit more, and they're able to get layups. They're able to take advantage of maybe more aggressive defensive coverages off ball on the perimeter, just by virtue of being a threat to hit a three. So the threat of Tessa Johnson works just as well as the production of a good Tessa Johnson. Now, when it comes to Mylasia, the big thing, and I think Mylasia might be more important in this game for this reason alone, and it's something I touched on earlier in this show, was UConn is elite in transition. And sometimes when you play a team that's good in transition, stopping their transition offense is one of those easier said than done things. By a mile, because that's a controllable on offense, right? So if you are trying to get back on defense, you don't send as many to the glass. You don't offensive rebound as well. And for an offense, that puts more pressure on your shooters to make shots, because now you're limiting possessions. Because one thing about South Carolina, where this has been a pretty constant for them in the last 5 years, so they've been elite offensive rebounding teams. They can have bad shooting games and still be at up 1.1, 1.2 points per possession because they're just creating more possessions by getting offensive rebounds. And not only they're creating more possessions, those offensive rebounds usually come off the rim somewhere between like 0 to 8 or 9 feet from the basket. So now you're getting the ball in an advantageous position near the goal, and you're able to get maybe more looks. That's why a lot of really great offensive rebounding teams that are efficient around the basket end up surviving being bad shooting teams, if that's the case with those teams. But with UConn, if you want to sacrifice your offensive rebounding and send more girls back in transition defense, you can maybe stop them. But UConn's got the athletes, so sometimes they can just outrun you down the floor. And if UConn is to get 14 to 20 fast break points in this game, you got to be able to combat that with some fast break points of your own. Because the one thing that you have that UConn doesn't is a deeper bench. The ability to throw waves of bodies out there, to be able to dig 10 deep into your roster and have 10 different girls see a decent amount of minutes. And if you're able to do that, Malaysia's able to create fast break opportunities of her own, which we've all seen her do. She is a magician with the ball on the open floor. If you're able to grab like a defensive rebound, hit her with an outlet pass, and let Malaysia just go and do what she does in transition, to be the behind the back stuff or making these incredible dribble moves, Euro stepping into the lane and getting a layup. Like, that's what she does best. That's where Malaysia Fulwiley thrives. And that is when she becomes total box office to watch, is because she is so good in the open floor. And if you're able to match UConn's ability to score in transition with Malaysia Fulwiley, the edge that UConn has in that department shrinks. So the importance of Malaysia in this game is that she is your ultimate rebuttal to a great transition offense by having your own transition offense. And now if you're just going tit for tat with, transition buckets, then maybe you can trust yourself to get back on defense a little more and still be able to send 3 or 4 to the basket to crash the glass on missed shots. If you're able to do that, you can get yourself in a really advantageous position into this game. Jen, yes. Shout out Jen. Jen Jensen from the early game comments, when would South Carolina be considered a blue blood program? What does it take for that designation? I think getting to be the third team to be a program that's won more than 3 national championships. I think once you do that, I think you then separate yourself from the other programs that have had a history of winning championships in this sport outside of Tennessee and Connecticut. Because Tennessee and Connecticut are here. Like, Tennessee's won 8 national titles. Connecticut's won like 1 billion. And by that, I mean maybe like 10 or 11. I want to get that right, specifically, because Gino's shattered that record book. I mean, I think I heard somebody today allude to him as like the John Wooden of the sport, even though I think he might have won more, because I think Wooden won 10. Ariema has, drum roll please, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. He's got 11. He has 11 championships. Going to take a long time to get to 11, but it's UConn's in a class of their own, right? In terms of championships, Tennessee's in a class of their own in terms of championships because they have 8, but with nobody else having more than 3, if you win and get your 4th, and considering you do it in an 8-year stretch, yeah, Jen, I think you can put them in what you'd consider to be a blue blood type of program. Even though when I hear the words blue blood, I kind of always think schools that were pioneers in winning it, like in men's basketball, right? If we're trying to draw comparisons, like UCLA was a dynasty before the sport had a dynasty. Kentucky was dynastic before you had a lot of schools win a large collection of titles. Indiana was kind of the same way. So that's one of the reasons, I guess, why they're considered blue bloods. Duke, I guess, is considered one, even though it took them until 1990 or 91, the first Leitner year, to win their title. But then they went back to back, and they win another one later on in the 2000s. And then, Coach K ends up winning 6. Yeah. And then that puts you in that position. Right. So Jen, yeah, to answer your question, I think getting yourself to be in a sole class of the championship airplane, that first class, right, with UConn and Tennessee, counts. I would count it at that point. Blue blood, new blood, whatever you want to call it, you are an elite program. You're already an elite program. but you put yourself historically in a company that just you never thought you'd see. And that kind of goes back to James. James commented earlier, because I kind of posed the question, if you've been following this program for more than 10 years, if you ever thought they would get to this point, like you're fibbing a little bit. And he says, no, never. I'm still having a hard time believing we are back in the national title game for the third time in 4 years. It's crazy. In any sport, reaching a national title game for the third time in 4 years is absurd. And then to be in 5 straight Final Fours also kind of is blue blood type territory, right? Like how many schools go to 5 straight Final Fours? Here's the answer. Only one. That's UConn. And Tennessee's never done that. Tennessee's never gone to 5 straight Final Fours. As great as what Pat Summitt built in Knoxville is, and as dynastic as they were, they never went to 5 straight Final Fours. Now, for Pat's entire career, she went to the Sweet 16 every year, and that was always the fill-in, right? Like the season starts, Tennessee and UConn are in the final or Sweet 16 every year, right? And then the occasional upset happens, but yeah. You've put yourself in that position, and to be where you're at right now is a testament to, you've used the word dynasty so many times in the stream already, but the empire, the basketball empire that Dawn has built, and you've seen it reflected in recruiting too. Players want to come here because they want to win. And that's one of the reasons why they recruit so well, and they recruit the type of players. Like, for example, Sanaya Fagan. Sanaya wasn't going to play a lot the early part in her career, but she knew that she can come to South Carolina, be a part of some great national championship teams, develop to the point where the last 2 years of your career, you're a focal point of the offense. You're a focal point of the team, and that matters. And Dawn at the press conference today said that Sanaya is a lottery pick. And I don't think Dawn's just saying that because that's one of her players. There's not a human being that is more connected to the WNBA than someone like Dawn Staley or like a Lisa Leslie, a Cheryl Miller, Cheryl Swoops, like that. She's in that rarefied class that, you'll always be connected to the WNBA because you're one of the pioneers of that entire organization in the sport. But for Dawn to say that Sanaya is a lottery pick, which I didn't think a lot of people thought coming into the year, Sanaya Fagan would be a WNBA lottery pick by the end of the season. But especially with like the mock drafts that I normally see and kind of keep up with throughout the year. But Dawn says that not just because it's her own player, but because she talks to people. She talks to a lot of people, whether they're coaches, executives, right? Like she understands like the scouting that goes behind building a WNBA team. And if she says that Sanaya is going to be a lottery pick, I'm going to believe her. But Sanaya is one of those players that came into this program, didn't play a lot the first couple of years, but developed, and just by virtue of playing in those practices, developed and maybe sacrificed a little bit of playing time for a lesser role to be a part of something great. And Sanaya's got a chance tomorrow, along with Bree and Raven, to be a senior class that won 3 national championships in their time at South Carolina. 3 of them. Now, Raven can technically come back, and I forget why she has that option to be able to come back if she so chooses. But if she does choose to do that, then she has an opportunity to win 4 in 5 years, right? But the senior class is the perfect example of it, right? They had to wait their turn. They had to earn the trust of Dawn Staley to get into the starting lineup on a consistent game-by-game basis. And they reaped the benefits of it by winning championships. That's right, Adam. You're right. Yeah, Raven tore ACL freshman year in game 2. That's right. So she has that year of eligibility because she technically, redshirt. So, good call. So she's got that ability to possibly win 4 and 5. And the only other player I can think of that's won 4 is Breanna Stewart, which would put Raven in a specific class too. But those players, like this senior class especially, I feel like it certainly encapsulates what this program's built to be and the type of players they look for. Because offensively, Sanaya offensively has bailed this team out at times, has been able to take over games at times. And she's been able to get her own scoring numbers up a lot more this year. But when you think of Bree Hall and Raven Johnson, you don't think of 20-plus point scorers, dominant scorers. But what Bree and Raven do, it's all the little things. It's the 50-50 balls I alluded to earlier in this show when I was talking about Tahina Paopau's second steal. It's playing elite defense. It's buying in. It's being great help defenders. It's being a little bit of everything that translates to winning. It's not just the best scorer. You need players like Raven Johnson and Bree Hall to win championships. And you don't win the championships that you have in the last few years without those two players, right? Raven does everything that translates to winning. She is a willing and a really good passer. She is an elite on-ball defender. She knows the concepts of the defense in and out. She plays great gap help defense. And she's an amazing communicator. And she dives on the floor for loose balls. She plays hard. Bree's the same way. Now, Bree's got a really good jump shot, and you saw her hit a big three last night and tripping and falling afterwards. But you saw Bree Hall be an elite, or not elite, a really good three-point shooter, and she's shooting like an elite three-point shooter in this NCAA tournament when she gets those opportunities. But Bree Hall's value is that she might be the best on-ball wing defender in women's college basketball, and maybe the best one in the last 4 years. And because she will take the toughest defensive assignment and take them out of the game. Look at the previous 3 games against Madison Booker. Yeah, Booker got her shot off last night pretty well. And I thought Booker played fantastic. And her getting in foul trouble, I think, was really the turning point of the game when she picked up that stupid third foul near the end of the first half. I mean, you don't have to try to make that play. I get the hustle. I get trying to get into the play and steal a possession. I totally understand that. But when you got 2 fouls and you're the best player on the team and you're the SEC player of the year, you got to understand you are way more valuable than your team than having to sit out because you picked up 3 fouls in the first half. But despite as well as Booker played last night, Booker hit tough shots. The stat sheet might not reflect being shut down, especially considering she scored a lot of points and not a lot of minutes. But Bree made her earn those. And in the previous 3 games, Madison Booker shot under 30% against South Carolina. Again, under 30%. And in the games Carolina beat Texas before last night, so in the 2 wins against Texas, the one in Columbia and in Greenville, Madison Booker shot 21% from the field, primarily guarded by one Bree Hall. And when you play an elite team like Texas, who's got an elite scorer, if you can take them out of the game, which is always the thing everybody says in sports when analyzing game, if you can take out player X, then you will get result Y. And it's always just easy to say that. It's hard to actually stop a player who can go for 25 or 30 on a given night. But Bree Hall did it on multiple occasions to that same player. Madison Booker is going to go on to have an incredible WNBA career. If Vic Schaefer ends up coming to his senses and says, hey, instead of taking 271 mid-range shots and less three-pointers, take more three-pointers because you shoot those at the same percentage, she can maybe average 20 plus in a season, or average like 25 plus rather per game in a season. She has that capability because she's an elite shooter and elite scorer. But for Carolina to have a player like Bree Hall who can go out there, get the assignment, scout it, understand it perfectly, and execute it to a T, that's a game changer. And then you can have an elite player and that not be the ultimate move in the game to win it for you. And that's, again, between Raven and Bree, those are the 2 players that really, I think, kind of illustrate what this program's about and how you're able to win the titles that they have and go and have a senior class that went to 4 Final Fours. They get it. And when it comes to previewing tomorrow's game, that's the one thing that I can't get over is South Carolina's experience. Like my basketball brain and my eyes from just watching South Carolina's games in the NCAA tournament and UConn's games in the NCAA tournament tell me that no one's beating this UConn team. But what I can't get over is that South Carolina's got the advantage of a group that is playing for their 3rd championship and has been in 4 Final Fours. UConn doesn't have that. They've been to Final Fours, right? Paige Beckers has played in Final Fours. Paige Beckers got beat by South Carolina for the NCAA championship in 2022. But she's not won it, right? That was kind of like the Caitlin Clark thing. Like last year wasn't Caitlin Clark's first Final Four. That wasn't her first national championship game. But getting to that spot and getting over the hump is something completely different. And when we get into that situation where the lights are on, and millions of people are watching and you're playing for all the marbles, I trust Dawn Staley as much as I would trust someone like Gino Auriemma, which is crazy. I mean, again, another sentence I didn't think a lot of Gamecock fans could imagine themselves saying in 2025 when Dawn Staley took over the job a long time ago, that we would get to this point where you'd almost trust Dawn Staley as much as you would trust Gino Auriemma to win a national championship. But that's where we're at. That here we are. I trust this coaching staff to be able to put together a defensive game plan that can maybe limit what UConn wants to do, especially since you've played them once before and you've seen that that tape, I can't pull the trigger on picking UConn because of this, because I just trust this group, even when they don't play well. Like, that's the thing about the South Carolina team too, man, whether it be a bad first half on offense against Indiana, whether it be hitting a wall on offense against Duke in the Elite Eight, whether it be getting Maryland's absolute best shot in the Sweet 16. And even at times this year, there'd be really close games, but I never felt that this team was going to lose it, because they're too good. They're too good and they're too experienced. They got the players in the room who have won bigger games. They have been in tougher positions. This is just a team and a program that is so accustomed to winning, and it's so part of their DNA, especially in these big games, that I don't know if I can immediately say, yeah, UConn's going to win. UConn's favored by 6.5 in most sports books right now. The ESPN Basketball Power Index gives UConn a 57% chance to win. And I understand those numbers. I get why the spread is what the spread is. I get why the computer would favor UConn because of how efficient offensively and defensively. And if you go on barttorvik.com, which is really kind of like the Ken Pom equivalent for women's college basketball too, and it's free if you're into that type of stuff, UConn's the number one offensive efficient and defensive efficient team, adjusted by opponent and schedule. They're that for a reason. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I can't believe South Carolina's not favored in this game. Oh, I can't believe people are picking UConn to win this game. I get it. And if you watch that game against UCLA, they took the number one overall seed in this tournament and just completely wiped them off the face of the earth in one half. That game was over by halftime. And UCLA had nothing for what UConn was doing. And this UConn team is playing a beautiful brand of basketball. It's everything that you would want in a team. They play great defense. They are great in the open floor. They can absolutely shoot the lights out. And go back and look and see what it was they shot from three last night in a game. Well, Stat Broadcast isn't doing a very good job. Let's just go to our friend Bart Torvik here and see what UConn's been shooting from three. Like this year, they're almost a 40% 3-point shooting team, and they're not afraid to let it fly. And they all get those threes like within the flow of their offense. It's really funny because I'm looking at it right now. Connecticut is number one in offense and number one in defense. South Carolina is number two in offense and number two in defense. But yeah, UConn, number 4 3-point shooting team in the country, 38%. Number 2 2-point shooting team at 58%, which makes them the number 2 effective field goal shooting team in all of college basketball. Oh yeah, and they're top 5 in turnover rate, right? Just an absolute brand of silliness occurred last night. They were 7 of 16. Just looking at their 3-point numbers in this tournament run, Arkansas State, they're 13 of 28, 8 of 18 against South Dakota State, 10 of 26 against Southern Cal, 10 of 22 against UCLA. Absolutely remarkable. And for what it's worth, Bart Torvik has UConn winning by 4, which is definitely under what the point spread is. So if you're into dabbling in the dark arts of gambling, wherever you can do it, because you cannot in our great state of South Carolina, then it might not be a bad idea to put South Carolina plus 6.5 to cover that spread. Because I think that's what's going to happen too. If I'm betting against the spread, I'm taking the Gamecocks to at least cover what that number is. I don't think UConn's going to blow them out, because this team's the Gamecocks are too smart. This program's too smart. Don Staley's too smart. They're too aware of what happened in Columbia. And I think they're going to come out with a game plan to really set a tone and to make sure they kind of send the message across that they're not going away early. And that's one of the reasons why you're glad you have Winston Gandy as an assistant for one more game, because for those who don't know, Winston had the scout against Iowa in last year's national championship game. I can imagine he's going to be a heavy part of scouting Connecticut and changing a little bit in the game plan with what happened back in Columbia in February, because that result and that game plan is not going to fly, brother. It's not going to fly because this Huskies team is playing better than they were then. And they have reached a ceiling right now that is national championship caliber, and not just national championship caliber, like all-time great type team caliber type deal, right? So it'll be a great game. I think South Carolina has encouraged me enough in that win last night, whether it be Tahina Paopao scoring the most points she's had in like a month in a game with 14 and hitting threes, with Tessa Johnson hitting those two jumpers, then knocking down a dagger three of her own, with Mylasia Fulwiley kick-starting the offense by coming in and getting to the basket immediately and creating open looks for her teammates. And you know what Chloe Kitts can do. She didn't have to shoot the ball last night. She didn't have to take like 15 shots or draw 8 fouls like she did against Duke, right? She didn't have to do that, but she was incredibly efficient in the moments that she was in the game. And that's how she gets 6 points on 3 shots, right? And even only playing 15 minutes because she got in foul trouble. But you know what Chloe can do when it comes down to closing a game out. That's, why I've kind of coined the term closing time Chloe, because when a game gets tight, you can trust her to be able to take it over. And she's shown that ability, especially here in the last, or not just last 3 months, in the entire year, because she did it against Michigan. She did it against Duke the first time. She did it all throughout the SEC tournament. But South Carolina's got the players to match UConn. They have the players. And even though they haven't looked as consistent as UConn has, in a one-game setting, in a winner-take-all, with one team that's got all the experience in the world at winning these games, with the immense talent that they have and the depth of their roster, you cannot count them out. So if I'm picking it, I might actually lean South Carolina because my basketball eyes and what I've seen tell me UConn, but my gut tells me South Carolina because of a lot of the intangible stuff, right? I know sometimes it can be not thorough analysis to say that somebody wins because they're going to have more heart, because we don't know that. You're not inside their head. But yeah, I've been around this program now the last 2 years where they've done nothing but win. And I can tell you that if there's anybody that has the secret sauce to winning, it's Don Staley and this coaching staff. And not to say Gino REM and then don't, because they clearly do. It's the most dominant program in the history of the sport, and maybe one of the most dominant programs in the history of all of college sports, if not the most dominant program in the history of all college sports. But with what this team is right now, they're very self-aware. I think they can maximize shot selection. If they are able to control UConn in transition and maybe make this a game in the upper 50s, lower 60s, and it's a one-score game late, I don't see why South Carolina doesn't win this. Because here's the thing, too. Here's the one thing about South Carolina I don't think we've talked about enough is how these close games that they've had, whether it be against Maryland or Duke, or the first half against Indiana, or if you want to go back a little further, the regular season finale against Kentucky, even the loss, the one score loss that they had against Texas in the regular season, they are able to find out how they can win games when everything's tight and everything's equal. I'm going to read you off some scores here. These are the final scores of the games UConn has won since they got beat by Tennessee on February 6th. Providence, they win 77-40. St. John's, 78-40. South Carolina, 87-58, blowout win. Seton Hall, 91-49. Butler, 86-47. Creighton, 72-53. Marquette, 92-57. In the Big East tournament, St. John's, 71-40. Villanova, 82-54. Creighton, 70-50. NCAA tournament, Arkansas State, 103-34. South Dakota State, 91-57. Oklahoma, 82-59. Southern Cal, 78-64. And last night, they broke a record for the biggest blowout in the history of the Final Four by beating UCLA, 85-51. They have been on an absolute tear, and they are not just beating teams, they are evaporating teams. But that tells me this: they have not been in a game decided by 6 points or fewer since February 6th. South Carolina has played in a few of those games where they have been pushed to the limit. So if the game gets close and it's in the 50s and 60s, and South Carolina does defensively what I think they can do to UConn, and we have a one-score game with 2 minutes left and we're in the 60s, I'm going to feel good about South Carolina's chances of winning. I really am. Not just saying that as somebody who's working for the flagship station of South Carolina, not just saying that as somebody who's just been around the South Carolina program, not just saying this is somebody that's a resident of South Carolina and does have a little bit of a vested interest in them winning. I'm saying that because they are battle tested. They have played in games where they've had to pull themselves out of a mess. If there's any team that can take UConn to the wire, make it a close game, and that you can feel confident in them beating them when things get really tight, you're looking at it. South Carolina Gamecocks. So I think that's what's going to make tomorrow really interesting. Thank you all for tuning in. We've got about 50 minutes here. This is awesome. I've had a fantastic time getting to cover you guys. Shout out to Adam, to Jen, to James for commenting. My man Daramus, I hope you're still watching right now, buddy. Good friend of mine, Daramus, and got to hop in the comments section too and check out a little bit of our coverage. And of course, my coverage here in Tampa is brought to you by our fine sponsors, my good friends who have been responsible for sending me all over the place here in the last month and a half or so, with Columbia Craft and Peak Drift. Wearing my Columbia Craft hat right now. You can't see the logo because I wear my hats backwards, but Columbia Craft and Peak Drift, Atkins Law, and Lexington Discount Homes. Fantastic support we get from them to allow me to get to do the coolest job on planet Earth, and that is getting to cover the Dawn Staley coach South Carolina Gamecock team all the way up to a Final Four in pursuit of their 4th national championship. So thank you all for tuning in. God, we're going to have an awesome game tomorrow. History is on the line. I'll be doing something similar to this. I don't really know what time because of how long, especially if they win, the celebration takes a long time and the locker room availability takes a long time. So I'll try to tweet it out at @E_Campbell3. And of course at 1075 The Game's Twitter, which is just at 1075 The Game. We'll try to give you guys a heads up for whenever I go live to react to whatever happens tomorrow, because it is going to be a wild game. Very excited about it and excited to get to talk to you guys about either a national championship or falling one game short. Either way, we're reacting to a national title game in Tampa tomorrow. Stay tuned here on this YouTube channel at The Game TV. Fantastic stuff. Great talking to you guys. Hope to see you all tomorrow. And maybe we'll be talking about another South Carolina national championship. Good stuff, gang. We'll talk to you later.